Hello, and welcome to Inventors Helping Inventors. I'm your host, Alan Beckley, inventor of the Wonder Wallet. If you're an inventor searching for proven ways to make money with your invention, if you dream to see your product selling in stores everywhere, you've come to the right place. There's no better place to get help than from experts, inventors who've already achieved success. Every week, I interview successful inventors, asking them the questions you want to know. Tune in to learn from the experts so you can get your invention out of the tank and into the bank.
So in hearing aids, we are replacing a small speaker with another small speaker, but our speaker is actually a bit smaller than the hearing aid speakers. So we're replacing a small speaker with an even smaller speaker, but providing much better frequency response, addressing the problems that people have in their hearing aids and making them hear better than today.
Summertime is upon us now. As an inventor, this is a perfect time to hone your marketing message, so you're ready to hit the ground running this year to approach companies with your product. Through premium coaching, I've helped quite a few inventors just like you to do just that, to create your clear, concise, and compelling marketing pitch. I'm happy to help you gain traction with your product, as I have for other podcast listeners. So if you're hearing, it's not really for us, it means your marketing message is unclear to them. It's not compelling. That's why they say no. If you'd like to know more, to see if premium coaching might be a fit for you, just email me at alan@alanbeckley.com and put premium coaching in the subject line. I'll get back with you to set up a Zoom meeting. But don't wait, as I have room to take on only 2 more clients at this time. So again, just email me at alan@alanbeckley.com and put premium coaching in the subject line, and I'll get back with you to set up a Zoom meeting. Oh, quick update. 2 weeks ago, a podcast listener joined me as a new premium coaching client. This means I now have room for only 1 more client. If premium coaching seems right for you, don't wait, or someone else will get that last slot ahead of you. Just email me at alan@alanbeckley.com and put premium coaching in the subject line. I'll be happy to help you. Welcome to episode number 540. Today, I interview Moti Margalit. Moti Margalit grew up in Israel, though from ages 6 to 10, his family moved to the UK and he lived in London. Then they returned to Israel. Engineering and technology fascinated Moti. After high school, he got his undergraduate degree in electrical engineering at the Technion, Israel Institute of Technology in Haifa. He also got his master's in electromechanical theory, then his PhD in lasers and electro-optics at the Technion as well. He furthered his education with a postdoc at MIT for 2 years, where he studied quantum optics. Then he returned to Israel to begin his entrepreneurial and inventing career. Moti is a co-founder and CEO of SonicEdge, a deep tech pioneer reinventing sound through ultrasonic modulation, unlocking smaller, vibration-free speakers with studio-quality audio. With his background in lasers and electro-optics, Moti transitioned from technologist to inventor. His career spans 80-plus patents and a pivotal stint at Intellectual Ventures, where he learned to turn scientific breakthroughs into market-defining products. A problem solver with entrepreneurial spirit, Moti was inspired to create SonicEdge when a conversation about hearing aids revealed the limitations of traditional audio tech. Today, he's on a mission to make SonicEdge as transformative for sound as LEDs were for light by scaling its tech to power the future of immersive personal audio. You'll want to listen to this entire interview where Moti shares why conventional speakers work well for many applications, but are very limited for small form factors, such as hearing aids, where sound quality suffers and they're often uncomfortable for long-term use. Also, how his company SonicEdge is finally bridging the technology gap to bring tiny MEMS technology-powered speakers to small form sizes, promising improved sound quality and comfort for millions who use hearing aids. And finally, why he feels expanding your knowledge outside your field of expertise yields ideas and insights that will benefit you in every aspect of your career. Now let's get right to our interview with Moti Margalit. Well, Moti Margalit, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast with us today.
Thanks. It's my pleasure to be here.
Moti, I'd like to start by asking, can you share a bit of your background with our listeners? Like, where did you grow up and go to school, and what did you do before you became an inventor? Could you share that with us?
Sure. I was born in Israel. I grew up mostly in Israel, but for 4 years, ages 6 to 10. And my father had a job in the UK. So I spent those years in London, then came back to Israel and basically did the standard Israeli high school. And in Israel, we also have a compulsory army service. So after that, there was the army service. Anyhow, I served in the Israeli army in some technical job and then started university. I studied at the Technion, electrical engineering, graduated and continued to do a master's and PhD, the master's in electromagnetic theory and the PhD in lasers and electro-optics. After finishing my PhD, I spent 2 years as a postdoc at MIT doing research on quantum optics. And then I came back to Israel and basically embarked on career entrepreneurship.
I think from what I've heard, it's not too unusual to find a fair number of Israelis that have spent some time in England or UK as part of their kind of, and maybe going back and forth between the two. But you had, as you described, between ages 6 and 10, you were in London, and then you came back to Israel. And I was going to ask for clarity. So what university was it that you went to in Israel again?
I studied at the Technion. That's the Israel Institute of Technology.
Greatness. And you got your bachelor's, master's, and PhD there then, right?
All from the Technion. The Technion is located in Haifa. That's a city about 1 hour north of Tel Aviv, on the beach. Not on the beach, but on the shoreline. And yeah, it's a beautiful city.
That sounds great. From perusing your website, your company, SonicEdge, offers an incredibly small but powerful micro speaker that works entirely differently from typical speakers that use coils and magnets to create sound. Your, I guess it's called MEMS, MEMS technology, micro speakers are so small that it appears, to me at least, that the entire speaker might be no larger than, say, 3 inches by 1 inch in size. Besides the tiny form size of your micro speakers, what makes them different or better than conventional speakers? Could you speak to that?
Sure. So in a typical speaker, what you have is a membrane, a piece of plastic or paper, which is moving. By its movement, it is pushing air, generating sound pressure. And ultimately, that is what we perceive as a sound. And the challenge in speakers is that you really need to get that movement in place in order to hear sound. And as you make speakers smaller, it's challenging to keep the movement as well as balance the different, let's say, resonances that are required for good operation. So making a small speaker is a big challenge. to solve that, I went back to first principles and asked myself, what can I do with a really small speaker? So if you look at your standard, let's say, speaker system, a large speaker, a subwoofer makes low frequency sound. A tweeter, which is a small speaker, makes high frequency sound. So if you want something that's really small, and in our case, our basic element is the width of a hair. So it's really small and it's best for generating ultrasound. So our very small speaker is generating ultrasound. And if we put several hundred of these very small speakers on a silicon chip, we can have a very good ultrasound speaker. The problem is we are not that. We can't enjoy music that riding at ultrasound frequencies. So we need somehow to take that ultrasound and make it into sound. And that is really where the innovation came about, because if you look at the other disciplines like electrical engineering, you have radio where you move from voice to electromagnetic high frequencies and then back to voice. And those transitions from one frequency to another frequency are called modulation or demodulation, depending on the direction. So I took those concepts from electrical engineering and applied them to audio, saying if I could only demodulate that ultrasound signal, I would be able to generate sound. In acoustics, the principle of demodulation can also be understood that if you look at the ultrasound, it has all the pressures we need, high pressures, low pressures. The problem is they're coming out too quickly at ultrasound rates, 400,000 times a second, instead of audio, which is, let's say, 1,000 times a second. So what we do is above the ultrasound speaker, we have an acoustic channel, and we can open and close that acoustic channel at very high speeds. So we can choose the right pressure at the right time. And by choosing the right pressure at the right time, we're generating sound from ultrasound by modulation. So that acoustic modulator is demodulating the ultrasound and generating sound from ultrasound by this opening and closing of the acoustic channel. Now, when we started out, that was the principle. And it took us, of course, some time to actually come up with a structure that makes it work. And also, as we worked on it, we realized also why this enables a smaller speaker. Because if you look at the same structure and you think of a membrane or a speaker pushing air and the channel is open, so air will flow forward. Then when that membrane is moving back in the reverse direction and pulling air, the channel is now closed, so air does not flow back. So actually, what we have built, and again, the basic structure is the width of a hair, 50 microns. So what we have built is a air pump which operates 400,000 times a second and very efficiently pushes air in any direction we want, depending on the timing of the membranes. So what we have actually achieved is that instead of having a large speaker membrane, which is typically moving at, let's say, 1,000 times a second, we now have a very high-speed pump operating at 400,000 times a second. And that 400 times difference is what enables us to make the speaker smaller. The high-speed membrane, the one operating at 400 kilohertz, it can move much less than a comparable membrane. So even though we have a smaller speaker and less movement, we actually have more airflow. We're replacing the size of the membrane with the speed of the high-speed pump.
And you really gave us a lot to chew on there about this technology. And I wanted to take several of the key points you make from a high level perspective for our listeners. And as I got it, ultimately, there is a challenge, several challenges when you use a typical speaker that has a membrane that pushes sound essentially. And that is when you get smaller and smaller speakers, it becomes more and more problematic for that to work compared to larger speakers where you have your subwoofer and all those tweeter and all the rest that allow that. So you went back to essentially electrical engineering and looked at the concept of using an ultrasound technology that's not driven by membranes at all, but allows it to be incredibly small. I think he said the thinness of a human hair. And this allows you to have 400,000 times per second versus 1,000 times per second. It allows you to go down to an incredibly small size because you're not moving air in the same way, with one caveat. We're not bats. We can't hear ultrasound. Humans can't really perceive that. You need to be able to do some kind of conversion of that, as I understood that. And that's where you go in and demodulate that to now make it where the sound levels are such that humans can hear and perceive. Is that generally accurate?
Generally, yeah.
So now you've got something that, as best I can tell, by and large, mostly didn't exist. In other words, and that is the potential to make an incredibly small speaker that still has good sound quality. And so I want to speak to that just a little bit. A lot of our listeners may not be familiar with MEMS technology. And from a high level, what are the key benefits of using the MEMS technology for a micro speaker? And also, besides very small form size, does it require less power than typical speakers? And does it have better sound fidelity, like total harmonics distortion? Can you speak to the benefits from a high level? And then again, what are the key benefits from the MEMS technology?
Sure. So first, let's say a few words about MEMS technology, because MEMS is not a new thing. MEMS stands for micro electromechanical systems. And I would say the first MEMS devices were manufactured back in the 1990s. And the first devices actually were accelerometers. Before, let's say, the invention of the airbag, one of the problems was how to deploy the airbag. So you needed a very accurate accelerometer, which would deploy airbags in the case of a crash, in case there's a deceleration, which is more radical than just pressing the brakes. And the challenge was that accelerometers at the time were very large and costly. And the first MEMS devices were accelerometers, I think made by Analog Devices. And essentially, it was a very small mass made in silicon. And when that mass moved because of acceleration, there was a change in capacitance. The bag was deployed. So from those humble beginnings, actually, if you look at your cell phone today, you have accelerometers, gyros, barometers, silicon clocks. All of them are made using MEMS technology, that micro electromechanical systems. And the really good thing about MEMS is they're manufactured in the same way we manufacture the computer chips. So these are made in silicon fabs. And like the computer chips, they can be manufactured in huge volumes, repeatably for very low cost, and they can be integrated into electronic devices. So today, MEMS are a central part of the electronic ecosystem. There are more than 50 billion MEMS devices made every year. As I said, in cell phones, in laptops, in the cars, everywhere you would find MEMS devices. And it's a manufacturing modality that has a lot of benefits. For audio, we had this revolution happen with MEMS microphones, where the old microphones were replaced with MEMS microphones, the advantages being the size, the cost, uniformity, and the fact that it's very easy to manufacture them, assemble them, and use them. So today, most of the microphones in the world are also MEMS microphones. I would say about early into the days of the MEMS microphone, we're talking 2005 here, of course, people were saying, let's also make a MEMS speaker. The same benefits we see in the microphones, let's see that in the MEMS speaker. And early attempts at building MEMS speaker using the same approach, that means a standard speaker is a moving membrane. Let's make a moving membrane in MEMS. Those approaches have been unsuccessful. And those approaches have resulted in very limited speakers, which cannot replace the old technology. The desire to make a MEMS speaker is because of manufacturability, of weight. You can say also sustainability, because speakers use magnets, which are a rare earth material. Typically, MEMS devices consume less power, are smaller, so there are a lot of benefits to transitioning to MEMS speakers, but there was no way to make a good MEMS speaker until SonicEdge came with this modulated ultrasound principle. The modulated ultrasound principle enabled us to make a speaker using MEMS technology, and that changed the game.
Thank you so much for laying that out. And step by step, as I was listening to it, you made several points I'd like to highlight for our listeners. It could be the average person perhaps has never heard of MEMS, people who are not into that level of technology. But in fact, as you mentioned, there's over 50 billion MEMS devices per year, and our cell phones and many other electronics now use MEMS devices. You know, that technology in some form has been around for quite some time, but what your company has done is bridge the gap that was missing. So, for example, there were MEMS microphones that were working, and that was working pretty well, but creating MEMS speakers had been quite a big challenge. And your company is the one that has bridged that gap. SonicEdge has bridged the gap, being able to create now a MEMS speaker that basically can demodulate, et cetera, and give you all the benefits. Now you have the benefits of they can be produced in mass volumes at low cost, very small sizes that are very hard to do, as I understand it, with a traditional speaker. You've bridged that technology gap to create something that wasn't really there before.
That's very accurate. So the modulated ultrasound speakers that we have invented and developed are a totally new concept. And when you do a literature search, when you look at things that have been done in the past, typically you would find some references which are similar in technology or something that you can draw on. But in our case, really the analogies are outside the domain of the acoustics. And in acoustics, this is the first time that anyone has doing a speaker using these principles.
I wanted to ask you to take it in a slightly different direction also from here, and that is on your website, you mentioned that SonicEdge speaker is ideal for hearing aids where size is very limited and conventional speakers simply may not perform very well. Your website also mentions your speaker provides TWS or true wireless stereo. Can you speak briefly to TWS and why it's important or unique compared to conventional speakers? And also, if you could, where the SonicEdge MEMS technology is so beneficial for small speakers like hearing aids that in many regards don't work as well as most people would like. Could you speak to those?
So I'll start from the TWS system and earphones, TWS earphones like the Apple AirPods and similar products are very common and people use and appreciate them very much. We have something like 300 million of these TWS earphones sold every year. So it's a very large category in the consumer electronic space. But Qualcomm, which publishes the state of sound, so that's like a marketing report about the state of a certain segment in the audio industry, they published one about the TWS earphones. And what came out of that is the consumers have two issues with the TWSs today. The first and foremost is comfort. People complain that these earphones are not really comfortable. And many times when you look at people in, let's say, conference calls, they would not be using these small earphones. They would prefer the headphones or something else which is more comfortable to wear for many hours. So the first issue in TWS is comfort. The second issue, and this is sometimes there's pushback on it, but the second issue that the State of Sound says is about sound quality. Now, there's an objective reason why sound quality is not so great in these earphones, because the speaker, as we said, when you make a speaker smaller, there's a penalty to pay. And in the case of earphones, typically what is lost are the high frequencies. So earphones don't really reproduce frequencies above, let's say, 10 kilohertz. And that means you lose the sharpness of sounds, you lose some of the depths of sounds. And earphones sound not as natural as, let's say, a headphone or, of course, real world. Those two items are addressed by the speakers that we provide. The first one is the comfort, where the size of the speaker, the acoustic interface into the ear. So instead of that uncomfortable silicon that you use today, we can have a different form factor, which makes it much more comfortable. And the earphone itself will be smaller and would fit more naturally into the ear. So by using our speakers, the consumer would have a more comfortable earphone. And our customers, the electronic companies using these speakers in their earphones, they would be able to differentiate themselves from competition. The earphones would look different. They would have a different feel to them. And that is, let's say, highly regarded by our customers. On the sound quality aspect, so actually some earphones today have not one, but two speakers to address that quality of sound. And two speakers, of course, require more space, introduce complexity in the electronics and acoustics, and at the end of the day, cost more than one speaker. So in our case, the one speaker we have, which is smaller, also produces sound starting from lower frequencies. We can start from just a few hertz, and we can go up to 20 kilohertz and more. So we can actually have a broader speaker than existing speakers, and all this in a smaller form factor, providing more comfort and a better sound quality.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I really grabbed those two key benefits, the way you laid those out. Just like to highlight again for our listeners that once again, the TWS has been used a lot, like Apple earphones, et cetera. There's something like 300 million out there, but there's a couple limitations with them in these earphones. And one of them is just literally, as you described, the comfort problem. If you have those in your ears for any length of time, they're just uncomfortable. And a lot of people then migrate to headphones because of that. And the other one is there's simply sound quality limitations with traditional speakers in such a small form factor, in that you end up losing the higher frequencies. It's a less natural sound. Anything over 10 kilohertz just tends to get lost because those speakers cannot pick that up with the limitations. And what you've done to SonicEdge, you've addressed both issues. Because you can go down to a much smaller form factor easily with this technology, now you can produce a smaller earphone that fits more comfortably in the ear and solves the comfort factor. And then regarding the quality of the sound and the speaker, it sounds like it's, I would say, incredibly better because the range is phenomenal. It can go above 20 kilohertz and all the way down to just a few hertz, as I understood it. It's like a dual benefit. It's more comfortable, and then the quality is better, and you have a single speaker instead of two, so less cost there as well. Just a quick comment I would have to that also is I think that would be particularly beneficial to people with hearing aids, right? Because all the things you just described would be problematic, I presume, with somebody with a hearing aid, and they're going to have it in their ear most of the time if they want to hear anything. Is that true?
So in hearing aids, you bring up an excellent point. Hearing aids are actually more comfortable than earphones because the speaker is smaller. But in hearing aids, because the speaker is smaller, its performance is limited, and the range of sound frequencies you get in a hearing aid is limited. This is the reason that people find hearing aids rather limited, because they focus on providing sound at the speech frequencies, but they neglect the high frequencies and the low frequencies. Again, because of size limitations. They would have liked to do everything, but they focused on size and comfort. So they can be worn all day, but then the penalty is in the frequency response. And for example, the high frequency in the case of hearing aids, it's actually from 7 kilohertz or even 6 kilohertz. When you don't have those high frequency aspects, we use sense of direction, and the people with hearing aids have a hard time once there's noise or in crowds. It's very hard for them to really understand speech because they lose the ability to distinguish the direction from which sound is coming. So in hearing aids, we are replacing a small speaker with another small speaker, but our speaker is actually a bit smaller than the hearing aid speakers. So we're replacing a small speaker with an even smaller speaker, but providing much better frequency response, addressing the problems that people have in their hearing aids and making them hear better than today.
I was listening, the key point that I picked out, and I've heard this before, and you spoke to it as well. Unfortunately, with hearing aids, because the smaller form factor again, now you've got a bigger problem, and that is it cuts off both the high and low frequencies. So the quality of speaker really is degraded significantly. And I think you said the maximum was 6 or 7 kilohertz. And that's the technical way of getting to the point of something people with hearing aids complain about all the time is if they're we'll use Starbucks, and there's quite a bit of other ambient noise of other people talking. Often they have trouble clearly listening to the person that's maybe right across from them, because whereas a person with normal hearing can basically filter out selectively other sounds and focus on one particular one, somebody wearing a hearing aid has much more of a challenge doing that with conventional hearing aids. Well, I want to now move to the kind of towards, as we're rolling a little bit towards the end, but what is the current status of the SonicEdge speaker? Has it been introduced into the marketplace yet? And if not, when do you anticipate rollout? And also, where is it in terms of the marketplace and being introduced yet? And what are your plans for that, if you could speak to that?
So I'm a bit limited in how much I can expand on that because we're working with select customers to integrate these speakers into their TWS product lineups. But I'm hopeful that, let's say, by end of 2026, you will see earphones in the market with these kinds of speakers.
That's great to hear. So it's coming. It just takes time to do that and do all your user testing and all the sorts of things you have to do before you can do that full rollout.
So keep in mind that we are making a component, a speaker, and the lower you are in the food chain, the longer it takes to get to market, because once we have our product ready, our customers now need to build an earphone around it. And it takes about 12 months from start to product launch. So we need to be ready with our product, and then we work with our customers to integrate it into earphones. And then our customers will launch that earphone into the market. And like I said, I hope that will happen by end of 26.
Yes, that makes perfect sense. I'd like to ask you, as we roll towards the close, are there any parting words you'd like to leave us with?
So I think the podcast is about inventions and inventors. And I would like to mention that my professional career has been, I would say, also typical of my interest, in the sense that I started out as an electrical engineer, then did a PhD in lasers and electro-optics, and today I'm doing speakers. So it would look like there's no combining line, but I believe it's Steve Jobs who said that you can only connect the dots when you look back at them. So in a way, my career has taken me from working with lasers to making those lasers smaller, understanding how you can actually build up devices using MEMS technology, and ultimately using that MEMS technology as a way to generate sound. So even though the path has been somewhat convoluted, on the way I picked up pieces of information, experience, and insights, which have enabled me to come to problems with a fresh approach compared to the other people that were looking at those problems. And I think if there is one piece of advice that I give, is that there is a lot of benefit to expanding outside your field of expertise. On the one hand, your field of expertise is where you learn how to swim, but then once you are proficient in your swimming, you gain a lot of benefit by trying to then apply your experience and knowledge in fields which are different than what you were originally trained in. And that both develops you as, let's say, as a professional, as an inventor, but also makes life much more interesting.
I so much agree with what you were saying, and that is the life of an inventor generally is a somewhat diverse experience, as you described the Steve Jobs. I've referred to that before as well, connecting the dots, looking backwards. Hard to connect the dots moving forward. You think, where is this whole thing going? And a lot of times when you have diverse experiences and get degrees in different places, it's really hard to see how those things are going to converge into any kind of meaningful solution. But in fact, it does. And as a result of that, as you clearly described, there's a key benefit to having experiences beyond just your key field of expertise. It really expands your ability to create unique and innovative products, I would say.
Totally. I second that.
My last question for you then, Moti, is how can our listeners reach you if they have other questions or would to learn more?
I think I need some guidance on how to answer that, but I'd be happy to provide my email, or they can look for me in LinkedIn. I don't know if you can make any connections through the podcast if you share links, but either LinkedIn or email is fine.
Okay. And again, like LinkedIn or email, if they just look up your name, will they find it that way?
Sure.
And that would be spelled Moti, first name, last name Margalit, Margalit. And they would be able to find you through LinkedIn. And from LinkedIn, I presume they could find your email. Is there a website where they can go to learn more about this as well?
Of course, there's the SonicEdge website, which gives more details about the SonicEdge and what we do. I used to have a blog website. I've not maintained it in quite a while, but I do write some posts and articles on LinkedIn, mainly about AI and creativity.
Okay. That sounds fantastic. Moti, again, I want to thank you so much for being on the podcast with us and sharing this exciting technology that is now moving into an area where historically it has not been utilized to provide some real benefits that are greatly needed for very small, high fidelity speakers, especially in applications like hearing aids and many other things that I think the benefits of this are going to be really amazing. So thanks again for being on the podcast. And I'd like to just reserve the opportunity, maybe another 6 months or a year, especially maybe towards the end of 2026, when we can connect with you again and see what you've got going on at that time.
Sure. Happy to do that.
Okay. Thanks again for being on the podcast then.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I want to take just a couple of moments to do something I don't do often enough, and that is to give you a huge thanks for being a loyal listener to the Inventors Helping Inventors podcast. If you've listened to 2 episodes, or 200, or 400, or anywhere in between, you are a loyal listener, and I appreciate every single one of you. This particular week is very important and meaningful to me. Why? Because on January 14th and 2019, I started this podcast 6 years ago. And I have to tell you, when I first started this podcast, I didn't know if I could find 50 inventors I could interview for the podcast, much less over 300 that I've found and more coming to me every day. It's absolutely amazing, and I just love this journey. Without you and podcast listeners all over the world, this podcast would certainly not be going. So once again, I want to thank you. I'm so excited to now have gone on for 6 years with this podcast. My goal is to help you and inventors all over the world by bringing you interesting guests with interesting inventions and cool products, and to share their life stories, their challenges, and their aha moments with you. I hope this will help you as you go through the challenges with your own invention. Now, I'd like to finish with a small favor, and that is, if you could take just a couple of moments and give me not only a rating, preferably 5 stars, but also a review on either Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen, that would be amazing. It helps the podcast more than you might know to keep going and to draw other listeners just like you. And sometimes inventors tell me, well, I don't listen to podcasts, so where do I find it? If they tell you that, here's what you tell them. They can always find the podcast on www.alanbeckley.com/podcast. They can find every episode there. So thank you again for being a loyal listener, and more is coming in 2025. Thanks so much for tuning in to Inventors Helping Inventors. If you like the show, please tell your friends about it. Make sure to subscribe in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts so you won't miss a single episode. Talk to you soon.